I'm Terry Shepard. Being a confident podcast guest is a skill that can be learned. And that's why I wrote How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. It's a sweet and short primer that teaches you about the gear, the appearance, and the messaging that can grab and hold today's micro attention spans and motivate your listeners to take action. How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. The digital version is just $1.99 at Amazon. Grab your copy today and sell more books tomorrow.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
Thanks, Lisa. Today's guest is someone who proves that doing can be a life's work, and a wildly interesting one at that. Peter Samuelson calls himself a pro-social entrepreneur, but that title barely scratches the surface. He's a film producer, a father of four, and a driving force behind a remarkable string of nonprofits. From Starlight Children's Foundation and Starbright World, co-founded with Steven Spielberg, to First Star, which supports foster youth, and EDAR, an innovative response to homelessness. In Finding Happy, a user's guide for your life with lessons from mine, Peter takes readers on a no-holds-barred journey through adventures, misadventures, and life-altering moments. It's a guide for Gen Z, millennials, and honestly anyone who wants to cut through the noise and find clarity, courage, and joy in an overwhelming world. Peter Samuelson, welcome to the conversation.
So happy to be here. Thank you.
What is happiness? What's your definition?
Well, I think there's short-term happiness, which is sitting in bed with a bucket of chocolate ice cream. And then there's long-term happiness, which is rather more challenging. I think, and it's what the book is for and what the book is about, it's about finding one's own personal meaning for life. Like, why are we here? What's it for? I think the purpose of your life is to be happy, but the way you become happy is kind of a little bit counterintuitive because it's not grabbing. It turns out that where happiness comes from is pushing out help for other people, and through that, finding your own agency, your value in your own mind and in the eyes of everybody else. And that is how I think you find a good life. Where this began is that after I had done the Starlight Children's Foundation, and we can come back to that, and then Steven and I had done Starbright World, I realized that American foster kids don't go to college. 6% of them go to college, as against roughly 50% of the whole population of 12th graders. And I thought that was completely bonkers, mad, crazy. Because if anybody would need to go to college, it would surely be kids with no decent family to support them, no environment to lift them up, nowhere to live after they turn 18 and age out of foster care. So I invented, it's the children's rhyme, Starlight, Starbright, First Star, right? Couldn't make it work for EDAR, but whatever. So First Star, I approached UCLA and I said, here's the deal. I want you to agree, Chancellor Block, that you will allow me in a building in the middle of campus to house, educate, and encourage high school-aged foster kids in a cohort or class of 30 of them for 4 years, grades 9, 10, 11, and 12, because I believe if we do that, and if we pull from the environment of the university to encourage them, to give them academics and life skills and community and new brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts and so forth, using everything a university is, I think they will go to college. So here we are, it is 15 years later. You heard me say 6% of American foster kids go to college against 50% of all 12th graders. Well, get this. Here we are right now. It's the month of May. So we know across the country at our 12 academies, we know who's going to college. It's 89% of our seniors in high school. 89% are going on to college. And the ones who are not going on to college are going on to something equally virtuous and helpful. They're going to be firefighters and police officers and plumbers and engineers and electricians, and they'll go to vocational school. But the huge majority of them do go to college. Around half of those get a 4-year bachelor's degree and the other half get an associate's, and some of them transfer over for their junior and senior year. So what I realized, and this is where the book Finding Happy comes from, I realized I've mentored at this point hundreds of young adults, kind of, 15 to 30-year-olds. And I've developed, like a film producer does, kind of pattern recognition. I've worked out what are the 36 things that bother them, that they feel challenged by. And I created a structure where each chapter is an issue. Like, for example, what is a good risk? What is a bad risk? How can you tell the difference? And in parallel, I realized I have had adventures as a film producer that are completely bonkers. Nobody would believe them, but they are true. And they are either very scary or very funny. And I've worked with some very well-known, famous film stars and so forth. And the only way to write these books, I thought, was I will get up without fail every morning at 5 o'clock and I'll write for an hour, which I did for a year. But about halfway through, I realized this is not 2 books. This is 1 book, because I can use the adventures in the screen trade to illustrate. So, for example, that chapter about risk-taking, well, I've got it all right and all wrong on multiple occasions. I mean, I am honest to God, and I put it in the book. I'm the guy I was making a film called The Return of the Pink Panther in Marrakesh, and I pulled an all-nighter to try and catch up on the accounting, and I hear a meowing at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I follow my ears, and it's coming out of my bathroom, and I go in the bathroom, and there is like a big double door cupboard thing on the wall, and I open it, and it's not a cupboard, it's a pipe duct. And I look down with a flashlight, and at the bottom, maybe 5 floors below, I see 2 little eyes looking up at me, and that is a kitten. And I think, well, this is smelly and dark and greasy and horrible, and no one's been in this pipe duct since they built the hotel 150 years ago. I'm not going in there. I'm very sorry, Mr. or Madam Kitten, but you're on your own there. So I go back to my desk and I'm trying to do the numbers, and it doesn't stop meowing. And in the end, like 40 minutes later, I thought, right, okay, I will rescue you, and I hope you'll be grateful. So I go in the bathroom, I take off all my clothes, and I clutch hold of this vertical pipe, and I climb down to the bottom, 4 or 5 floors below, and there is the kitten, and there am I, and it takes one look at me, all covered in crap and, naked and the whole thing, and it runs away into some other labyrinth of duct work, and I never saw or heard of it again. So then I thought, all right, okay, so this is a waste of time, and now I'm filthy, and I'm at the bottom of a pipe duct. So I thought, right, well, I have to go back up, and I'll have to have a shower. So I started climbing up, and I realized I didn't have the upper body strength to pull myself out of the pipe duct. I would get like 10 feet up and then slip 3 feet back. And about a quarter of the way up, I thought, this is not working. So I thought, okay, I need to get help. So I went back to the bottom and I started shouting. Nobody came. It's now 4 o'clock in the morning. And so I thought, all right, well, never daunted. I'm going to do it very slowly with maximum leverage, and I'll have a rest after every 10 feet. And that's what I did. And it took me over an hour, and I finally collapsed back into the bathroom through the double doors of the closet thing. And I picked myself up. I got in the shower. I had a shower. I went and sat at my desk, and I'm back in the numbers again. And there's a knock on the door, and it's one of our electricians. And he says, I'm sorry to bother you so early in the morning, but could I go over my petty cash with you? And I thought, He has no idea. I just had a near-death experience. I nearly died. So I used that in the book as an example of, no, that wasn't intelligent. Why did I do that? Well, I felt compassion for the kitten. That's good. But when you are a young man, and I was like 22 years old at that point, you don't have a developed front on your brain. The prefrontal lobe hasn't grown yet until your late 20s if you're a young man. So you are operating entirely on the reptilian fight or flight back of the brain, the amygdala, and the back of the brain says, oh, kitten at the bottom of a pipe duct, I should go. Saber-toothed tiger, fight or flight. Do I fight it or do I run away? Later in your young adulthood, you grow the front part, which is the chess game of life. Is there anyone with me? Because if there's anyone with me, then there are two of us to fight the tiger. Or if I run away, I don't any longer have to run faster than the tiger. I only have to run faster than the other person. If I had had the front of my brain pumping away, I would have thought I should probably study how to get back up before I go down. And so I've used it as a life lesson in the risk-taking that the first thing you look at as a young adult in taking a risk is, could this kill me? If this goes maximally wrong, will I die? Because if you might die, you probably shouldn't do that one, and so forth. But it's not an accident that there are more fatalities and serious car crashes involving drivers who are 17 to 25 years old. It's because they don't think about the chess game of life, the consequences. Anyway, so I wrote the book. I thought it kind of worked, and I experimented a bit with kids that I mentored. And I said, what'd you make of this? And it seemed to go down rather well. So I thought I'll have to pay Amazon to publish it. You know, they'll do that print on demand thing. No, I got an agent. The agent got a bit of a bidding war going. Simon & Schuster Regalo bought it. Then an audiobook company bought it, and it'll be out June 10 on everything you can think of. The hilarious one is the latest retailer. You know, it's at Barnes & Noble and other bookstores, but also Simon & Schuster have placed it with now Target. And when I told my family there's going to be a display of the books in Target, there was a silence, and one of my kids said, where are they going to position that? Is it going to go between the condoms and the plastic spoons? I said, that is shocking how much insight you have to your father's work of 2 years. It is indeed going between the condoms and the plastic spoons.
This is Peter Samuelson. He is the father, not only to that smart aleck kid, but to so many foster kids whose lives he's touched over a long period of time. He's written the book, Finding Happy, a user's guide to your life with lessons from mine. We all have big dreams. Why do so few of us have the courage and the patience to achieve them?
Well, that, of course, is the $64,000 question, or maybe these days with inflation and tariffs, it's the $6.4 billion question. I think one way I talk about opportunities and ambition when I'm teaching is I say, think of your life as you're in an envelope and it's dark and you're sitting there and you're in the middle and you have a pencil. You can choose. You could just sit there in the dark for the rest of your life, or you can poke away from the center with the pencil. And if you do poke with the pencil, every so often you will go through the envelope. You'll make a hole. And you will have to say to yourself, oh, I will never be a concert pianist. Oh, my math is not good enough to be an engineer. But then you have the opportunity as a young adult to pull back the pencil, choose at a tangent a different direction, and push in that direction. And as you explore, so you will work out between the opportunities that you have. And sure, you'll fail from time to time. But, you know, in Silicon Valley, someone goes out to raise millions of dollars in venture capital for their wizard new idea. The venture capitalists don't only want to know about their prior successes, they also want them to talk in granular detail about where they failed. What did you fail? Why did it fail? What have you learned from that? And so forth. So it's a holistic truth. If you're a young adult, you need to find your happiness. It needs to be short-term, medium-term, and long-term happiness. And it gets more complex the longer term you reach for. And what I've tried to do in Finding Happy is to use anecdotes, which hopefully are hilarious or they are scary or whatever, to illustrate these chapters. And I think there will be some young adults that will read the whole book from the beginning, page 1, all the way to page 350. But I think you can also dip into it. I've done the table of contents so you can choose a topic that bothers you. How do I find love? Where do I find love? I'm being bullied. What should I do about that? Oh, what career? There's 2 things I'm interested in. How can I find out what's the best fit for me? Which university should I try to go to? How do I deal with my parents? What do I do about my health? How do I know who's a good friend and who is a terrible friend? I'm attracted to negative people. How do I deal with that? And I've divided it up into chapters. There's like 3 dozen of them. And I think most young adults will read it that way. Interestingly, the publishers think the buyership is different than the readership. They think, and they would know better than me, that this is a book that any adult who has in their life young adult or adults that they care about would want to buy this at any life transition, middle school to high school to college, college to workplace. You know, who am I? What am I about? What are my ambitions? What do I do? And I feel as though my training ground as a mentor has been with kids who have more challenges than the average bear. And therefore, what bothers them applies to everyone. They have some special challenges because they've been abused or neglected and they're living with strangers and they get moved around like cardboard boxes. But they also are just teenagers and just young adults. And so what I've learned there is that they have an exacerbated, worse deck of cards, hand of cards. And if I can help them, then I ought to be able to help any young person. And I've tried to organize it in a way that, especially where an adult feels that they themselves are not qualified to be an expert. And also, let's remember, kids, they often don't want to tell their parents stuff, and they often don't want to tell their role model or their mentor sort of what is bothering them. And they often ask their friends, and their friends are idiots on the subject. So it's the blind leading the blind. So I've really tried to write what I know now that I wish I knew when I was 18. And I've consulted a whole lot of people. For example, a lot of poor kids are of color. And I wanted to do a chapter, but I thought I didn't dare, which was the written version of The Talk, how to be arrested without getting shot dead by someone. And I reached out to Kelly Douglas, who's she's the reverend at the Episcopal Cathedral in Washington, D.C. She's a good friend. She's on the board of one of my companies. And I said, do I do this? Do I dare do it? I'm kind of like, I'm an old white guy. What the hell do I have to do the talk? And she said, well, you absolutely have to do it. It would be a glaring omission. She said, what you might want to consider is bringing in one or more young people of color, ask them what they think. And that is exactly what I do. So that chapter has boxes in there written by young men of color, primarily, talking about their encounters with other young men, whether of color or not, but wearing uniforms and holding guns and trying to suppress their own amygdala-driven anger that they haven't done anything wrong and they want to be pushy with the officer. Meanwhile, the officer's biggest fear, because they're only 23 years old as well, is that they've lost their temper, and their fear is they're losing control of the situation. So they need to intimidate and be mean and shove around the young man of color. And, the point of the chapter, I also pulled from the ACLU. What are your rights? Do you have to identify yourself? Yes. Do you have to give them more information? No. Can they search you? No. Do you have a right to a lawyer? Do you have a right to 3 telephone calls if you're under 18, 1 telephone call if you're over 18? So all of these things, I got expert help, and it's all right there in that chapter. I think it's a very difficult conversation for anyone to have with their kid. And the book aims to give them every single thing that they need to know, like you will have your victory. If the law is on your side, that'll be in court. And when you have a lawyer, you will stand taller than your accuser and you'll win and you'll feel good. But the time to do that is not when he nervously and with a shaking hand is pointing a Glock 19 at your chest. Don't do that. Live to tell the tale. So there are chapters like that. And a lot of it has to do with how ambitious do I dare to be and what is feasible. And I realize in my life, especially my young life, I did tons of stuff that I had no right to be able to do because I just sort of dared to do. And I sometimes got it really wrong. And people bullied me. People were mean to me. I got fired, all sorts of stuff. But if I had just sat in the envelope and didn't poke with the pencil, I'd still be sitting there, instead of which I've got this really remarkable life. But the core lesson of the book in finding happy is get off your derriere, and whether as your job or as a volunteer, go into a charity and do good things, help people. There is a class, it's the only class I know how to teach in the foster academies, other than videography, which I can teach, and I do. But the main class I teach, I invented it. It only has 2 90-minute classes in the course. It's called Random Acts of Kindness and Pay It Forward. And it's very counterintuitive. There's a donor that we have who's become a really good friend, lives in Dallas, called Mort. I love him a lot. And I said, can you donate? He's very wealthy. I said, do you mind donating some money to First Star? He said, yeah, I want to give it for what you haven't done yet, which you wish you could do. And I said, oh, that's really interesting. Well, I have this idea for a course. And he said, I'll fund that. So the course is this. In front of me in the classroom at one of the academies sit the 30, I usually teach it to 10th graders, and half young men, half young women. And I say, okay, here's a question for you. You're walking along the sidewalk and there is an old lady in front of you, fast asleep, face down in rags. 3 choices. A, do you stop and put $1 under her arm and not wake her up? Or B, do you wake her up and give her the $1? Or C, do you look the other way and walk around her? And that becomes a conversation about the golden rule. And why do people who make those choices do each of those choices? And the golden rule, which is in 170 world religions in their scriptures, is the sense of social justice. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. A man never stands so tall as when he stoops to hold the hand of a child in need, and on and on. So we talk about the golden rule. And then I say, so if you were an atheist, does that mean you wouldn't have the sense of empathy to do something to help someone else? And they say, no. An atheist absolutely could feel human compassion and a need to create social justice and equilibrium in the world. And then I say, who can tell me what is the second law of thermodynamics? And usually in a class of 30, like 3 of them have ever heard of that. And we talk about the theory of entropy. And that is, thank you, Einstein. It says, the second law of thermodynamics, that in any closed system, and I say, what is a closed system? And they say, the motor in your car. And I say, yeah, what about a family? What about a planet? And they say, yeah, those are closed systems as well. The second law says if you don't apply energy to a closed system. If you don't oil the motor, if you don't nurture your family, if you don't keep your planet healthy and safe, it'll end up in random chaos, which is called entropy. So that's why I say you want to exert yourself. So that's the end of the first class, and the goal is to send them off as little thinkers, which they all are. And the second class, I say something extraordinary is going to happen to you right now. Each of you is going to receive, thanks to a wonderful donor in Dallas called Mort, you're each going to get $200. And they say, really? We're going to get $200? And I say, no, you can't keep it. You have to write a 300-word little essay to whom or to what you wish it to go. And then we're actually going to do it together. And then a couple of weeks later, you're going to go back and see if it did any good. Did the homeless guy buy the shoes, or did he buy the big bottle of whiskey? And that's what we're going to do. The essays are the most extraordinary. I mean, they are really remarkable. My name is Jose. I'm adding $10 of my own because that makes 210 and divide by 3. And that's the $70 that it takes to save the life of one dog that's going to be euthanized at the shelter. And I am going to save 3 dogs because the last time I was down there, I looked into the eyes of a puppy that had been very badly beaten. And I saw my own eyes because I was very badly beaten as well. So I am saving 3 puppies. Love, Jose. This class, it's as though the kids it's like watching flowers grow. They have never had, if they're in foster care, they've never had agency. They don't decide a damn thing in their lives. And then they have to decide too much on their own after they're thrown out of the system at 18 normally. Suddenly, they have to dream up someone in a worse place than them, and they have to work out what would be good. My mum is in prison. She did some very bad things, including some bad things to me, and she's in prison for another 2 years, 3 months, and 4 days, but she hates the shampoo there and the soap, so I'm going to put the money in her prison account so that she can buy better toiletries, stuff like that. And this agency, this power to do, this recognition that there's someone worse than you is very close to the meaning of life. It took me 3 chapters. The meaning of life is chapter headings, part 1, part 2, and part 3. And part 3 is at the very end of the book. And you need to buy the book in order to really grasp it. But the core of it is get off your derriere and volunteer for something. You can make a career of it, God bless, but you don't have to do that. You can simply volunteer for a charity and watch. I'll bet you a dinner that what happens to you is remarkably good for you as well as for whatever the cause is that you choose to work for. And you can do it on weekends. You can do it 6 hours a week. You can do it full time. You can get a job. You can earn money. But you can also have a career where you earn money to pay the rent and put food on your family's table. And you can also, on the side, do random acts of kindness and pay it forward. It's remarkable. It has had a extraordinarily vivid effect on the kids. It's one of the life lessons that I have taught where I then see the foster kids have taken it in. I'll give you an example. So last Christmas, a big posh restaurant donated itself at lunchtime, and we had an enormous bang-up lunch donated by the restaurant for 2 cohorts, so 60 current teenagers, plus a whole lot of alumni and staff and people from the university up the road and so on and so forth. So we have this wonderful lunch, and there are speeches, and the kids speak, and everyone's very emotional. And we come out and we stand on the sidewalk because the minor theme of firststar.org is we're always waiting for the vans. They're always late. They always go to the wrong place. Drives me mad. And out of the corner of my eye, I see the head waiter is coming. And he says to me, you know, I've got like 100 cupcakes with icing on top in little boxes because nobody ate them because they all filled up on the pasta. Should I throw them away, or what do you want me to do with them? And I said, no, don't throw them away. Terrible waste. Bring them out, give them to the kids, and they'll take them back to their placements and they can have them after supper or something. So they did. The waiters brought out these little boxes on trays, and every kid got one. A couple of kids got two. And I'm standing there, and the vans have still not arrived. And out of the corner of my eye, I see one of our more troubled kids, I guess probably 17 years old, and a really stubborn boy and very difficult to help him. But we were making some progress. And out of the corner of my eye, I see him walk away from our group, and he goes away up the sidewalk. I'm thinking, this is not good. And I'm getting ready. He's now 100 yards away, and I'm thinking he's doing a runner. He's running away. And I'm getting ready to tell the director, we need to send someone, find out what's going on with him, bring him back. And he doesn't run away. He stops. And there is an old man lying on the sidewalk. And our student, we call them scholars, he bends over, and the guy's asleep, and he puts the cupcake in its little box in the crook of his arm, and he sidles back to our group because he doesn't want us to notice. And I thought, he was listening. He got that from the class, and he did something remarkably kind, and he didn't want anyone to flatter him and thank him. And that's also part of what's in the class is the great Rabbi Maimonides. He said he did this pyramid of giving, and the most effective is teach a man to fish, don't just give him fish, and do it anonymously. And I always know the Jewish donors to my charities because everything comes in multiples of 18, $180, $1,800, whatever. Because 18 is the number 18 in Hebrew is the letters that say life, chai. So he even grasped what Maimonides taught, which I teach in the class, which is the pinnacle of giving, is to give anonymously, not for your own ego. And that's what he did. So I've learned more from these kids over these 20 years than anything I've contributed. But what I have learned, I've put in the book. And it isn't just for foster kids. It's for any young adult, 15 to 30 years old. And it, I think, should be bought. Sure, they can buy it, but it's maybe more for a grown-up in their life who cares about them and wants them to thrive. I just did a podcast with Teamsters across the country, drivers, truckers, 18-wheelers. And I said, what do you think about sitting there in a truck, driving from, across the country? You think about your family. You think about the teenager you're worried about and the fact that you're not there, but he needs, somebody mentoring him and coaching Little League and whatever. And I said, you could think about buying him the book, because what I've put in the book is every helpful thing that I myself have learned as a dad, as a charity runner, as an entrepreneur, as a film producer. It's the life lessons that I think will lift up young people. And on the cover of the book are all the words in a kind of word cloud that might be of interest. And I know you can't see this, probably.
I see what the biggest word is. The biggest word is love on that thing. Why is that the most important word?
Oh, I don't think any of us can do a damn thing without unconditional love. And of course, that's precisely what foster kids don't have. I think unconditional love means that however tough a day you have, you can go home and someone will listen to you. My wife and I, all the time that we had our 4 kids living with us at home before they went off to college, we used to do a thing every dinner that was called highs and lows. And from the time that they were very little, they would sit there and say, my high today is I got an A on my writing homework. And my low was that Billy was mean to me and pinched me and whatever. And we do that up and down the family. And I've also done it in First Star, but they have terrible, I have to be very careful in First Star because they come from abuse and neglect. Their lows are sometimes so disgusting that you have to be very careful about privacy. They feel very safe in First Star, and mostly I prefer that they talk about the very personal stuff, the abuse and neglect side with their peers, with the other students who give them an enormous amount of love. The best thing we do in First Star, it is, it's unconditional love in a bucket, is these are kids who are deprived of family for one reason or another. And we put them in an environment where it's like watching flowers grow. They build sibling relationships that are really intense and mutually supportive and the reliable grown-ups. But honestly, I think the sibling relationships with the other scholars are the most important thing. And I think that they are lasting lifetimes because in the alumni program, the same kids they went into ninth grade with are fully bonded with them. So I'll give you one example. So there we are in the Northwest Auditorium at UCLA, and it's the talent show. And I think it was either ninth or 10th graders, maybe a mixture. One by one, they're coming down on the stage, and there's maybe 200 adults watching them, most of them strangers to them. And one by one, the kids are singing a song, doing a poem they've written, or dancing, or doing spoken word, whatever. And down comes Catalina, little itty-bitty thing. And I knew she was a fantastic singer, and I thought, this is going to be great. And up comes the music, and she is so crestfallen and scared. She can't get the first note out. And worse, the music has now left her behind. And then worse, the music stops and she's standing there like a deer in the headlights. And I'm smacking my palm on my forehead and I'm thinking, this is BS. We should never have allowed this to happen. She's now crushed. This is the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing. And I can see out of my peripheral vision, the director of the program, Karina, is about to go down and usher her off the stage. And then a miracle happens, and not of the grown-ups doing, and certainly not of mine. In her same class, her cohort, is a big kid, a boy, a young man, sort of the build of a linebacker. And he lumbers down there on the stage, and he blocks her with his body. So we can see his back, but we can't see any of her except her feet, kind of underneath him. There's whispering going on, and then two girls from the cohort go running down, and now there's 4 of them, and then there's 8, and then there's 15, and then there's 25, and then there's all 30. And there's a lot of whispering, and from the outside of the scrum comes a hand, which makes a palm up, an upward gesture, turn on the music. And thank God the playback person remembered to make it start from the beginning again. And as the music began, out of the middle of this little crowd of teenagers comes this little plaintive voice, barely audible, but as she sings and she's invisible, we can't see her at all. But out of the middle of the kids comes this voice, and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And the song ends, 3-4 minutes later, and she sounds like Beyonce. And the audience, I cannot tell you what an emotional moment it was. Every adult stood up. Almost everyone was crying, and the kids didn't know what to do. They hadn't thought it through. What do we do now? And so they just put their arms around each other and they came off the stage as a phalanx. And I was so overcome that I had to go for a walk. And I thought to myself, we didn't do this. We just created the circumstance for the kid to build a family grossly unfairly. They've been deprived of unconditional love. but give them the opportunity and they will build it for themselves. And that is what firststar.org is. And a lot of the book is on that subject. You know, how do you find unconditional love? And it has to do with mentors, but it also has to do with just, you know, people who will love you. You don't have a grandma? Where can you find a grandma? And one of the things is volunteer. Why volunteer? Because you meet fantastic people. Why would they be volunteering alongside you if they were a piece of nonsense that you don't want in your life? Bullies don't volunteer, you know, bad people don't volunteer. Generally, they're wonderful people. And I met my wife volunteering next to her at the Starlight Children's Foundation, starlight.org. I did this one wish for a seriously ill little boy with my cousin, and they stayed in my apartment and for 2 weeks on a trip from London, and he was dying, and we dragged him around and did Disneyland and these various other things. And he had a final time. He went home and he passed away. And it was very sad, but it was bittersweet because we realized we had made him happy before he passed. And also we'd given his mum something to remember her son by that was happy. You know, him on the teacups at Disneyland, not him with a tube up his nose dying in a hospital bed. And I called a meeting because it's what do film producers do? We call meetings. And I stood there and I said, you know, we've done this one thing. Maybe we could do 5 or 6 a year. What do you think? And the other thing producers know how to do is how to crew something. So I had put together, I knew I needed a lawyer and an accountant and a publicist and a fundraiser and someone who understood the politics of hospitals and so forth. And I'd had one date with this accountant, very, very beautiful lady. And the date had gone well, but then I don't know why I hadn't called her, but got distracted. And I phoned her and I said, I'm so sorry, my bad, didn't phone you. That's awful. What a great date we had. I'm calling a meeting next week because I've got this new idea for a charity, starlight.org. Oh, no, I didn't call it starlight.org because we didn't have a name. And when the lawyer in the meeting said, what do you want to call this? I need to incorporate it, get a 501c3 and so forth. I had given it no thought. And it was the accounting lady who said, you know the children's rhyme, Starlight, Starbright, First Star I See Tonight? Why don't we call it the Starlight Children's Foundation? And I had a graphic designer there who said, oh, I can see the logo in my mind's eye. It's a child reaching for a star. So here we are. It's 40 years later. Several things have resulted. It's one of the biggest and most successful and most important children's charities in Australia, Canada, the United States, and the UK. We've raised and spent $1.4 billion, seriously ill kids and their mums and dads. But my personal happiness that has come out of it is, you know, being its dad or grandpa, or whatever I am at this point, but also that second date with that accounting lady. And then there was a third date and a fifth date and a 10th date. And then we went down to the children's ward at County USC Medical Center because it was Christmas and we had a live band and the kids were dancing. And there was this one girl where they had to wheel her entire bed in because she was too ill to get out of bed. And I saw a very emotional moment that she was dancing horizontal, lying in the bed, or actually on top of the bed. And I looked and we had these life-size character costumes that had been donated to us by SeaWorld. And one of them was a dolphin. And inside the dolphin, looking out through the sort of grill in its chest so she could see where she was going, was the young accounting lady. And she was so emotionally overcome by the child dancing in the bed that all her mascara had run. And that was the moment for me. And I thought, I love this woman. And so anyway, we got married. We have 4 kids and a blended family. And we've been together, whatever it is, 35 years, I think it is now. So yeah, it's okay to have benefit. And if you want to find happy, go volunteer to some charity. Watch how fast they promote you. You can be 20 years old and you're struggling in the workplace to get promoted for any position because they think you're entry level and you don't know what you're talking about, volunteer in a charity, have a good idea. You will be the vice president of something or other in about 3 minutes, because charities need volunteers and they need good ideas. So that's what I got. The book is called Finding Happy, and the website is Samuelson.la. So SAMUELSON.la. You can buy it in Target and Barnes and Noble and on Amazon and elsewhere on the internet. And there's an audio book, and there's a paper book, and there's an ebook, a Kindle book. And I have no clue what will happen, but I know that kids love it because I've been giving them copies to the foster kids, and they eat it up. So I think anyone out there, if you're a kid who's saved up their money and you can afford to buy the book, great. But other than that, go to your uncle or your aunt or your mum or your dad or your grandpa or grandma or your teacher or someone or other and say, I really, really, really want this book. And when it goes live on Amazon, you can even read the first 20 pages free on the website. And that I think will be helpful as well. So there you go.
It is rare, my friend, that I have a guest that all I have to do is ask a single question and sit back, and he or she answers every one that I could possibly think of asking. This extraordinary human being is Peter Samuelson. The book is Finding Happy, a user's guide to your life with lessons from mine. Final question for you. If the ultimate purpose in life is mitigating suffering, which I believe we both think it is.
Yes.
And you're not sure, depending upon what your age is in life, of where to start. You've mentioned volunteering. How do you decide where to go?
I watched, Jose cared about dogs. So he did his volunteering down at the Humane Society. I think it's a rare person who isn't interested in something. If you're interested in video games, go and help teach video games to children who are younger than you in a homeless shelter, somewhere like that. You know something that someone else needs help with and that you find really interesting. And of course, the other adage is true. If you want to learn something really well, teach it. I mean, I say two things: that there is a technique to getting the most out of your school education. The tendency is when kids have been very poorly educated, that they want to sit at the back of the room and fiddle around with their cell phones under the lip of the desk. But actually, one of the important things to teach is that your schooling is for you, and your goal is not to let a bad teacher stand between you and your education, which is the key to your future. And then I get into specific things that you must do. I say to the kids that I tutor and I mentor, in every single class, regardless of the subject, you must raise your hand and ask at least one question. Yes, be the teacher's pet. Why must you ask a question? First of all, because it's scary as heck. It will pump adrenaline through your brain and wake you up and make you focus. Secondly, in order to ask a question, you will have to listen to the bit of the class before that to work out what you can ask. By doing that, you will learn that lesson. And the other thing that you should do is be organized. Do not do your homework on the bus on the last possible day on the way to school. You can do it on the bus, but do it on the way home on the day that they gave you the assignment. Give yourself the enormous happiness that comes from being organized and therefore having to work less hard. How do you organize yourself? What is a spider graph? How do you not game your classroom, but how do you get better grades? There's a technique to doing that. What do teachers take note of? One of the things is the people who ask intelligent questions. But I say, even if your question isn't intelligent, ask the damn question, because it will make you wake up and get something out of the class.
There are two things that I want listeners to remember about this visit. One is this website, Samuelson, Samuelson.la. That is the starting point.
Yes, it's not a .com. It's not a .org. It's a .la. Why is it a .la? Because I could get it.
Right. And the second thing is, like every important lesson that you learn through repetition. So I hope that this program, I'm not going to cut anything from this. Most of our programs are less than 30 minutes because that is the researched attention span for most people who are podcast listeners. But this is a program like the best motivational classes that you should listen to again and again, because I promise you, with every listening, you're going to find another gem. Peter Samuelson, this has been life-changing for me. I hope it's life-changing for our audience. Thank you for all the contributions you have made to so many lives and for this conversation.
You do me great honor. I'm grateful for the interview. I'm grateful for the time, and I'm grateful for your listenership. And my email address is both on that website and it's in the book. My publisher thinks I'm a lunatic to put my email address in a book, but I put it there because I would actually like feedback. So, especially from young adults who read into the book, I want to know what they think.
And one thing to remember from my own experience on the speaking circuit and as a motivational author is that even when you give those out, only 1 in 40 people who hear this message will go to Samuelson, LA, will actually write to this amazing gentleman. And that person, if that's you, is going to have an amazing future, because that's what the science says. Peter Samuelson, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just raise your hand. That's the same as sending that email.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.